What's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to be looking at knight and pawn endings. And in addition to that, I'm going to give you some sort of general tips that I like to think about and use when playing with knights that you can use in any phase of the game, so opening, middle game, or ending, that I also think will be beneficial. So we'll be looking at both of those things. Let's get started. All right, so first thing about a knight, very similar to a bishop, is you can't checkmate with only a knight. Even if you were able to somehow force black's king to the corner and get this position, which is the best you could do, it's just a stalemate because black can't move anywhere, but he's not in check. And actually, even if you have this position where you have two knights, you still cannot force a checkmate. Now, I say you cannot force a checkmate. That doesn't mean you can't get a checkmate. So if black makes the mistake and just runs to a corner with his king, so he goes here and just sits in a corner, then you would be able to bring your knights forward, bring your king over, and get checkmate. But only if black voluntarily runs to a corner. If he does his best and stays in the center, you're not going to be able to force it. So that's something that's different about knights than bishops. If you have two bishops, you can always force a checkmate. You just create a V with the bishops, and then you're able to push black's king backwards and then push it to the corner and get checkmate. Knights can't do that. So by the way, if you want to see how to do that with the bishops, I have another video. I'll link it below. You can watch that one. All right, so now let's look at a somewhat common knight and pawn position. So you're playing white and your king is way far from this pawn, and black is trying to obviously come here, chase your knight away, and push this pawn to get a queen. And so if you can stop the pawn, you can get a draw. If you can't stop it and he's able to force your knight away somehow and get a queen, then you're going to lose. And so this is a good one to know if you ever end up in this position where you have one pawn that you're trying to stop and you have the knight. There's a little technique that you can use to get a draw. Basically, black's going to go here and he's going to attack your knight. And all you have to do is keep hopping your knight around and putting him in check. Because if he's in check, he can't move his pawn forward. So you always want to just hop it around and put him in check. Now there's one case that could happen. I'll show you that. So we put him here in check. Now let's say he goes here. What do? Same thing. Put him in check, right? Keeping him in check so he can't move his pawn. And again, if he moves here, put him in check. And if he moves here, this is an interesting one because if you'll notice, you can't put him in check anymore. None of your moves can put him in check. And also, you can't block the pawn, which would be a good idea, because if you block the pawn, he just takes it. So this is one little trick you have to know, but the move is to go right here. And the idea is, if he pushes it forward, you're setting up to get a fork on the king and the pawn. So he goes here, you fork him, and then you just sacrifice your knight for the pawn, and you end up with just kings, and it's a draw. So that's the only little trick that you have to be aware of. Other than that, any move that he does, so if he goes here, you just put him in check. If he goes here, you just go here, because as long as you control that square, if he ever pushes it, you just take it. He goes here. Remember, the trick is to go here and get the fork. All right, one thing to point out, this is almost the exact same position, except I advanced black's pawn by one square, and this actually is losing because now when black brings his king in to attack your knight, you have nowhere to go. You don't have that extra space like you did before where you could hop your knight somewhere. The only places are here and here, which he just takes it, and if you leave it sit there, obviously he also just takes it. So if the pawn gets advanced all the way to one space away from becoming a queen, and it's an A or H pawn, so it has to be one of these side pawns, then you're going to lose with the knight. And like I said, it has to be an A or H pawn because here's an example with a G pawn, and if black tries to do the same thing, well, now your knight has a place to go. So you can just go check. He goes here, you can go back there. He goes here, you can go check. He can't do anything, right? He can't ever make your knight stop doing this. You just keep hopping. Wherever he attacks you, you just go to the other side, put him in check, and you never give up control of that square. It's a draw. So to recap, the only time you should ever lose if you have a knight against a pawn like this is if it's an A or H pawn and it's all the way advanced to one space away from becoming a queen. Everything else, when it's just one pawn like this, you should be able to get a draw. And while we're talking about these flank pawns, so the A and H pawns, knights as a general rule are not very good at stopping them. So here's an example where you have your knight. Black actually has quite a few moves, 3 moves before he can get a queen, and yet there's nothing that your knight can do. The king kind of shields off where the knight would like to go, and even if you come up here, he just pushes his pawn, still can't really get there. You can try to hop over here, still can't really get there. and he's going to get a queen next move. So knights are not good at stopping A and H pawns, something to keep in mind. So what that would look like practically in a game is if your opponent has a passed pawn that's a A or an H pawn and all you have is a knight to stop it, you need to plan way ahead and don't wait till it gets to a position like this where his king is shielding your knight away, and then it's too late. So just try to plan way ahead for those kind of situations. That's the takeaway from this. All right, so one of the big things about knights is that knights are one of the most common reasons that people blunder. And, you know, the way that knights move, they jump over pieces, they kind of move in a weird L shape. They're tricky, and they're just hard to see forks sometimes. And this is especially true if you're in time trouble or playing in blitz games. There's knight forks happening all over the place, even in high-rated players. They're not as easy to see as bishops, rooks, queens, other pieces. So, perfect example here, black, you know, moves king to f7, just activating his king, trying to bring it towards the center, and he falls victim to this knight fork. I mean, these pieces are so far away, and yet the knight is going to win the pawn, right? So if black goes here, he captures, and let's say black goes here, trying to, you know, get close and attack the knight. Boom, there's another one, right? Lost another pawn, capture that. And so you can see how easy it is to blunder when you're playing against knights, or if you have the knight, you know, be on the lookout for those opportunities throughout your game. All right, the next thing I want to point out about knights is that they are short-range pieces, right? Unlike a bishop, which can cover the entire board in one move, knights take a little while to get where they're going. And so because of that, one of the best things to do with them is to keep them centralized. Because from the center of the board, you can get to any corner in about 2 or 3 moves. Like, depending on where you need to go, it's pretty quick if your knight's in the center. But if you put your knight on like one side of the board and then you realize, oh, actually I want the knight on the other side of the board, it's going to take a while to get there. In some cases, it's going to be really difficult to do that. So here's an example where a really good move for white, in my opinion, would be to go to d5. You're putting your knight on an outpost. So as a reminder, an outpost is when a knight is defended by a pawn and no other pawns can attack it. So there's no pawn here or here that could pressure this knight. And the bishop is on the wrong color square. Nothing can move this knight. So you can just sit there as long as you need it. You've got all kinds of options to really go to wherever you need that knight to go to, right? Now, if we back up a move, now if you made the mistake and went knight b5 trying to attack this pawn, well, now black's going to play h5, and after takes, this pawn is going to get a queen. And you can't take this with your knight, or you're not going to catch the pawn, right? So that was a completely wasted move. You can't go here. Sorry, you can't go here because the pawn. You can't go there because the bishop. So you're going to have to go back where you came from. He's going to start pushing his pawn. You could try to catch it, and you will catch it, but now your knight is stuck over here. You can't do anything with your knight. You got to babysit this pawn from becoming a queen. And black's going to be able to like move his bishop here. Your knight's going to have to sit in the corner. Really bad situation. But if we go back to this position, if you would have played knight d5 and black tries to do the same thing, well, now you can take it and boom, you've got a fork and that pawn is a goner. Now, he's going to probably try to use his bishop and stop you from doing that, but even still, you can hop back to f4, attack it, and get to h3, which is a much better square than like being stuck on h1. It's much better having it in the center to give you lots of options depending on what your opponent tries to do. All right, this next tip is pretty common, especially at lower and intermediate levels, but let's say you're playing white and you decide to move your knight here because you're like, oh, it's a fork on the pawns, I'm going to win a pawn. Awesome. Well, black plays c6 and you don't even think twice, you take the pawn. This is a huge mistake because now your knight is trapped. And all black has to do, so first of all, you can't go there because the pawn. You can't take this one because the pawn. So the only place this knight can move is right here. Well, black's going to move his king over. Now you can't go there. And it doesn't matter what you do. You can like try to move your pawn, but he's just going to bring his king up. You can go there, and he's going to go there. And guess what? Your knight's a goner. So basically, the idea to remember is be careful when there's like 3 pawns like this, and you're going to try to take one with your knight. It's very easy for knights to get trapped when you go pawn grabbing in situations like that. It doesn't mean you can never take the pawns, but you have to make sure you have a way out. So at least calculate before you take it, like, okay, if I take that, where's my knight going to retreat to? And usually the king is going to be the piece that's going to trap you in there. It could be other pieces, but you know, just look if it's going to get trapped or if there's a way to escape. All right, so this last tip I want to give you is actually super, super helpful in blitz and speed chess, but you can even use it if you're just playing, you know, regular kind of longer time control games as well. But let's say we move our king here and black plays knight to d5 check. And we're trying to think, okay, where can I move my king to so that I don't get put in check again right away? And so there's a couple of things, and I just have these memorized from playing a lot of chess. You can either memorize it or you can kind of think through it, but it's really good. I think it's really good to have it memorized. But when you move your king on a diagonal to the knight, so attacking the knight diagonally, you are always going to be able to put in check by the knight or from the knight 2 different ways. Okay, so both of these moves will put you in check. You can move there or you can move there. Also, if you move straight with 1 space in between, again, he's got 2 different checks on your king. And so those are good to just always remember, like if I'm going to go there, if I'm going to go there, he's going to put me in check for sure. If you don't want to be put in check, and this is what I use all the time in speed chess, when I'm playing quickly, I don't have a lot of time to think. I know that there's a knight putting me in check. I got to move somewhere. I don't want to have to deal with being put in check over and over again. I'll move my king directly next to the knight straight. Okay, so remember, if you go diagonally, you're always going to be put in check. If you go straight, it takes at least 2 moves. So 1, 2, before you can be put in check again. And an even better trick to know is if you move here, so diagonally, but leave a space in between. And now it's going to take black at least 3 moves to put you in check if you don't move your king. So for example, like 1, let's see, 2, 3 would be one way to do it. Or even if he comes over here, 1, 2, 3. There's all different combinations, but 3 moves before he can put you in check. So this is a really good one to know if you're in a hurry. You don't want to have to worry about the knight. You just move over there. Remember, diagonally with a space in between is where you want to go. And if you want to attack the knight but don't want to be put in check, then you go for this one right next to it straight away. But try to avoid going diagonally to the knight because you never know what it's going to set you up for. Like in this position, there's a fork there. And I could completely avoid that without even thinking about my pawns or any of my other pieces just by moving my king there because I know he's not going to be able to check me. Right? And if he moves here, I could do the same thing, right? I can move here. And if he moves here, I could do this almost instantly and know that I'm never going to be put in check by the knight, right? Just always go straight next to it. And if he goes there, boom, I go to the diagonal with a space in between, right? He goes here, I know that I'm good. He's next to my king. I don't have to worry about it, right? So that's what I find super, super helpful. You kind of learn that just from playing a lot, but for those of you who haven't, realized that, maybe just memorize that and look for it in your games. I think it will help you. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video. If you have a question or a comment, let me know. But as always, thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.